My name is Catherine, and I never imagined my wedding day, the day that was supposed to be a celebration of love, loyalty, and a new beginning, would end in such brutal humiliation. When I walked into that grand ballroom in Chicago, Illinois, I believed I was stepping into the start of a new life. The hall was draped in white silk, with chandeliers spilling light onto polished marble floors. Guests from across America had flown in, cousins from Boston, friends from Los Angeles, even a few business associates from Canada. It was a spectacle of wealth and pretense, a wedding designed not just to unite two people, but to show off. My dress was the crown jewel, pure white silk, custom made in New York, a dress that had cost me $4,800. I had paid for it myself, every dollar scraped together from overtime shifts and long nights working as an accountant. Daniel, my husband, had contributed nothing to it. That detail burned even hotter in my chest when everything unraveled. The ceremony itself was flawless, at least on the surface. Guests smiled, photographers snapped endless pictures, and Daniel played the role of charming groom with ease. But underneath it all, I felt tension like a string pulled too tight. His mother, Lorraine, had made her disdain for me clear long before the wedding. She had a way of looking at me as though I were some cheap substitute for the woman she thought her son deserved. She whispered criticisms loud enough for me to hear. "She's too independent. She doesn't know how to take care of a man." I ignored her, or at least I pretended to. Then came the moment that seared itself into my memory like a brand. We were at the reception, guests laughing, wine glasses clinking, a string quartet playing in the background. I had taken a seat beside Daniel, finally exhaling after hours of smiling and playing hostess. His mother walked into the room, and the only available chair was the one beneath me. I glanced around. Others sat comfortably, ignoring her. I didn't move. My body was aching in that heavy gown, my feet blistered from hours in heels, and in my mind, she was more than capable of finding her own seat. Daniel saw it differently. He leaned close, his smile fixed for the crowd, but his eyes hard as stone. "Stand up," he hissed. I raised my eyebrow. "Why?" "For my mother," he said. "Show her some respect." Before I could answer, he snapped. His hand whipped across my face with a crack louder than the music. My cheeks stung, and the room fell silent. 100 pairs of eyes turned toward us. The shock froze me in place.
He stood over me, his voice rising, venom spilling out like poison. "Apologize to her right now.
Or leave this marriage before it even begins." For a moment, the world blurred. I saw my family's faces, my sister clutching her chest in horror, my father's fists clenched. I saw Lorraine, her smug smile widening as though she had finally won the war she had been fighting in whispers. And I saw Daniel, my new husband, standing tall as if slapping me in front of everyone was a righteous act. The rage that surged through me then was molten, unstoppable. My humiliation turned to fire, and in that fire something in me hardened. I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not humiliate myself further by apologizing to the woman who had despised me from the start. Slowly, deliberately, I removed the heavy ring from my finger and placed it on the table beside the untouched champagne flute. I looked him dead in the eyes, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Then I'll leave," and I walked out. The cold Chicago night slapped me harder than he had, but I didn't flinch. My gown dragged across the pavement as I pushed through the doors of the ballroom and into the empty street. Behind me, voices erupted, shouts, whispers, gasps. Some guests called after me, but I didn't turn around. My pride would not let me. I got into the car I had rented with my own money, a black sedan that smelled faintly of leather and gasoline. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, but it wasn't from fear. It was rage, pure and sharp, a rage that carved a promise into my heart. He thought he could break me publicly and that I would crumble. No, that slap wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something much darker. By the time I reached my hotel room, the phone was already buzzing. Daniel's name lit up the screen again and again. At first I let it ring, savoring his desperation. When I finally listened to his voicemails, his voice was no longer commanding, no longer arrogant. It was shaky, panicked. "Catherine, please, come back. I didn't mean it. Everyone is talking. You made me look like a fool. Please, we can fix this. Don't leave me." His pleas made me smile, a cold, bitter smile. He thought I left because I was weak, because I couldn't handle embarrassment. He didn't realize I left because his slap ignited something inside me that he would never be able to put out. He wanted submission. What he created instead was fury. I sat on the edge of the bed, peeling off my gown, folding it with care as though it still meant something. My cheek was still hot, but the pain no longer mattered. All I could think about was revenge. I thought about his accounts in New York, the secrets he kept even from his closest friends. I thought about the way he had laughed when I told him I bought my house in Denver on my own, mocking me for acting like a man. I thought about his smug mother, who had orchestrated this humiliation like a puppet master pulling strings. Revenge wasn't just an idea now, it was a blueprint. He wanted me on my knees. I would make sure he was the one crawling. As the city lights flickered outside my hotel window, I clenched my fists and made myself a promise. I would not just leave Daniel. I would destroy him, his pride, his money, his family's image. Every dollar he valued, every connection he worshipped, every ounce of respect he thought he commanded. I would rip it from him piece by piece until there was nothing left but a hollow man, begging for mercy. And when that day came, I wouldn't give it to him. That night, as his calls kept coming, I turned off the phone. I lay back on the stiff hotel sheets, my cheeks still throbbing, and for the first time, I let myself smile not out of happiness, but out of anticipation. My wedding day was over, but my war had just begun. The drive from Chicago to Denver felt like a blur of highways and silence. I pushed the car past midnight, past exhaustion, past the ringing of Daniel's calls that never seemed to stop. My phone lit up like a beacon of desperation on the passenger seat, buzzing every few minutes, but I refused to answer. Sometimes his tone was frantic, other times threatening. One voicemail he screamed that he'd drag me back if he had to. Another he whimpered that he couldn't breathe without me. I let them pile up like garbage, each one feeding the fire inside me. Every desperate message was proof that I had already begun winning. When I finally pulled into Denver, the sunrise was just breaking across the Rocky Mountains, the sky a violent orange. I parked in front of my house, not ours, and for the first time since the slap, I felt a surge of control. The little brick home stood solid against the morning chill. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, and a porch that creaked with each step. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. I had worked for it, sweated for it, paid every mortgage payment down until the final one just 3 months ago. No man, no in-laws, no smirking mother-in-law could touch it. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and breathed in the scent of cedarwood and lavender. The air was calm, pure, nothing like the suffocating perfume of Daniel's cologne that clung to the Chicago apartment we'd shared. Here I could finally feel my own walls, my own space. It was freedom, quiet, and complete. I poured myself a glass of red wine even though it was still morning, sat on the worn leather couch, and stared out at the quiet street. For a brief flickering moment, I thought I might rest. But peace never lasts, not when revenge is burning a hole in your chest. By noon, the calls had multiplied, 10, 20, 30. I watched them rack up on my screen like bullets in a chamber. Daniel had shifted from panic to fury. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" one voicemail barked. "You think you can just walk out on me? On our families?" Another one arrived seconds later, his tone breaking into pathetic sobs. "Catherine, please, come back. I'll do anything. I didn't mean it. Don't ruin us." I deleted them all one by one, savoring each swipe of my finger. Each time I hit delete, it felt like cutting another string that had tied me to him. I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't his possession. I was the storm he had summoned with his arrogance, and I was just beginning to gather strength. As I walked through my house, running my hand along the walls I had painted myself, memories of the years with Daniel came crashing in, memories that fanned the flames of my anger. I remembered the first time he mocked my career, laughing when I told him I wanted to climb higher in accounting. "Cute," he had said, sipping whiskey. "But you'll never make real money that way." "Not compared to me." His voice dripped with condescension, as if my hard-earned salary, my stability, meant nothing. He flaunted his supposed superiority while secretly draining his savings on poker games in backrooms and online bets he thought I didn't notice. I remembered the nights he disappeared, leaving me to sit alone at dinners we had planned, and when I confronted him, he'd sneer, "Don't be so clingy, Catherine. A man needs his space. A man needed his space, but a woman, apparently, needed only to obey." And then there was the way he introduced me to his friends, not as Catherine, not as a partner, but as his little project. As if I were something broken he was fixing, something inferior he was sculpting into his own design. The memory of those words still made my stomach turn. All of it, the insults, the arrogance, the slap in front of both our families rolled together into one dark promise. I would not forgive. I would not forget. I would destroy. That night, I lit a fire in the old brick fireplace and sat cross-legged on the rug, a notebook in my lap. The wine glass was half empty beside me, and my phone sat silent now, Daniel's last call unanswered. I began to write not love letters, not journal entries, but plans, cold, sharp, deliberate plans. I listed everything I knew about him, every weakness, every secret. His accounts in New York that he thought I hadn't noticed. His gambling habits, his loans from friends he hadn't repaid. His desperate need to look successful, to look untouchable. He had built his whole life on appearances, and I would tear them down brick by brick until he was nothing but rubble. As I wrote, aggression poured through me like electricity. I didn't just want to leave him, I wanted to see him ruined. I wanted to watch him lose the money he worshipped, the respect he demanded, the power he thought he owned. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized the woman he had called a project was the architect of his downfall. I pressed the pen harder into the paper, nearly tearing it. My mind was a battlefield, and I was arming myself with every weapon I had. I thought of his mother, Lorraine, her smirk when he slapped me. I imagined her face when the scandal of her precious son's failures became public. I imagined the whispers of neighbors, the headlines in local papers, the gossip at his workplace. Humiliation for humiliation. Pain for pain. When I finally closed the notebook, my hands were steady, my resolve carved in stone. I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one, but there was no rest in me. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the plan echoing in my mind. I was not going to cry for him. I was not going to beg for him to change. I was going to make sure he regretted the day he ever lifted a hand against me. The empty house around me didn't feel lonely. It felt like a fortress. My fortress. And inside it, I was not the woman he slapped. I was not the bride who walked out. I was something else now, something sharper, something unbreakable. When I finally drifted into sleep, it wasn't with dreams of reconciliation. It was with visions of Daniel's ruin. I saw him stripped of his wealth, his pride crumbling, his so-called friends turning their backs on him. I saw him calling me again, not out of anger or love, but out of despair. And I saw myself standing above him, silent, merciless. The war had begun, and I intended to win. The days after I returned to Denver became a crucible. Every hour sharpened me, hardened me, stripped away any hesitation that might have remained. I wasn't the same woman who walked out of that ballroom in Chicago. I was colder now, hungrier. And most importantly, I had focus. If Daniel thought a single slap and a few threats could control me, he was about to learn just how dangerous a woman becomes when her dignity is torn away. I started with what I knew, his money. Daniel had always been careless with finances, blinded by greed and his obsession with appearances. He wore expensive suits bought with credit, drove leased cars he pretended to own, and boasted about deals that were nothing more than smoke. But beneath the lies, I knew the truth. He kept a secret account in New York City. He had whispered about it one night, drunk on bourbon and ego, bragging that it was his safety net. I had played dumb, nodding sweetly while memorizing every detail he accidentally revealed. His logins. His favorite passwords, the bank's name.
He thought I wasn't listening. He thought I was just his project. A pretty distraction.
He was wrong. One evening, sitting in my Denver living room with nothing but the sound of the clock ticking, I opened my laptop. My fingers didn't tremble as I typed in his credentials. The screen flickered, and there it was, his hidden account, fat with deposits stolen from friends and siphoned from business deals. The number glared back at me, just over $60,000, not millions, but enough to make him arrogant. Enough to make him believe he was untouchable. With a slow smile, I transferred $15,000 into an account under my own name. Not all at once, no, I was smarter than that. I broke it into pieces, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, spreading the withdrawals over days so the system wouldn't flag him immediately. I left just enough to keep him complacent, to make sure the realization of his loss would come like a knife twisting, not a single stab. That money wasn't just cash, it was a weapon. Every dollar I pulled was a piece of his pride, a crack in the foundation of the image he had built. And with every transfer, I felt the rush of vengeance surge through me, hotter than any wine, stronger than any drug. He had taken my dignity in front of 100 people. I was taking his empire from the shadows. But money was only the first step. Revenge had to be layered, calculated. I needed something bigger, something permanent. That's when I thought of Madison. Madison and I had been friends since college, back when we were two ambitious women with nothing but dreams and stubbornness. She had chosen law and I had chosen numbers, but we had always stayed close. Madison was sharp, relentless, a woman who cut through liars like a blade. Years ago, she had warned me about Daniel, telling me he was the type of man who fed off control, who would rather destroy a woman than respect her. I hadn't listened. Now I wished I had. I called her late one night, the kind of hour where only honesty survives. She answered on the first ring, her voice steady and alert despite the time. "Catherine," she said, as if she already knew why I was calling. I told her everything, the slap, the humiliation, the voicemails that swung from rage to begging, the secret account, the stolen money. I spoke with no tears, no hesitation. My voice was steel, and every word was a confession and a declaration of war. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she didn't waste time on pity. "I told you about him," she said finally. "But I'm glad you're ready to fight now." "I don't just want a divorce, Madison," I said. "I want to burn his life down to the ground. I want him to feel every ounce of humiliation he gave me and more." Her voice dropped to a razor's edge. "Then we'll give him hell." Within days, Madison was in Denver, carrying with her the kind of confidence only a seasoned lawyer could wield. She sat up at my dining table, spreading out files, papers, and a laptop that seemed to hum with purpose. Together we drafted divorce papers, not quiet, polite papers, but demands designed to break him. Alimony. Asset division. Full disclosure of his accounts. Evidence of his gambling, his fraud, his lies. Madison promised me that with the right strategy we could expose everything he'd tried so hard to hide. "He wanted control," Madison said, tapping her pen against the table. "We'll show him what it feels like to lose it all." Every detail we collected became ammunition. Every secret he had ever tried to bury, I unearthed. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how fragile his empire truly was. His friends trusted him with loans he never intended to repay. His colleagues whispered about deals that never closed. His family believed his lies because they wanted to, but I knew better. I had lived inside his arrogance, and now I was going to weaponize it against him. The aggression in me grew each day, a relentless hunger that wouldn't quiet. I found myself imagining the courtroom, imagining his face when the evidence was laid out piece by piece. I saw him stammering, sweating, the perfect mask of confidence cracking under the weight of truth. And in those visions I didn't see myself as a victim. I saw myself as the executioner, delivering justice with precision. At night, while Madison slept in the guest room, I would sit awake, staring at the glowing city lights through my bedroom window. I thought of Daniel's voice, how he had demanded that I apologize to his mother, how he had raised his hand like I was nothing more than a servant in his kingdom. My cheeks still burned with the memory of that slap. But now the burn had transformed into fuel. He had lit the fire. I was going to make sure it consumed him. The setup was nearly complete. Money taken. Evidence gathered, papers ready to file. All that was left was the strike, the moment that would send his world crashing down. And I promised myself, when that moment came, I would not hesitate. Daniel thought he had silenced me with violence. He thought he had control. But what he didn't know, what he could never understand, was that he hadn't created a submissive wife. He had created a weapon, and I was ready to be unleashed. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm I had been waiting to unleash. It was held in New York City, in a courthouse whose stone walls carried the weight of centuries of broken promises, shattered alliances, and punishments delivered. I walked through those doors not as the bride who had been humiliated in front of 100 people, but as a soldier marching onto a battlefield I had been sharpening my weapons for. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady and unshaken. Every step echoed with a promise. This was where Daniel's empire would crumble, and I would be the one holding the match. Daniel was already there when I entered. I almost laughed when I saw him. His once impeccable suits now hung a little looser, wrinkled at the edges as if even the fabric had stopped respecting him. His face was pale, his jawline no longer sharp but sagging with exhaustion. He tried to meet my eyes, but the confidence he once wore like armor was gone. All that remained was a nervous shifting in his chair, like a boy caught lying to his father. Beside him sat his lawyer, a man with sharp features and a voice that oozed arrogance. He glanced at me, smirked, and whispered something to Daniel. I didn't flinch. Let them smirk. Let them believe I was still the woman who would crumble under intimidation. They had no idea the arsenal Madison and I had prepared. When the judge called the session to order, Daniel's lawyer went first. His strategy was predictable. He painted me as dramatic, spoiled, ungrateful.
He said I had abandoned my husband over a simple misunderstanding. He described Daniel as a man under stress.
Pressured by family expectations who had acted out of character, he dared to call me vindictive, a wife scorned and seeking to destroy the man she couldn't control. I sat still, my expression carefully neutral, but inside I was seething. Each lie was another lash, each insult another spark to the inferno raging inside me, but I didn't rise. Not yet. This was a game of patience and my turn was coming. When Madison stood, the energy in the courtroom shifted. She didn't waste time with flourishes. Her words were knives, precise and lethal. She presented the evidence with the calm authority of someone who already knew victory was certain. Bank statements showing the hidden account. Gambling debts stretching across states. Records of loans Daniel had taken from friends and never repaid. And then the crown jewel, the recordings of his voicemails, his voice cracking between rage and desperation, contradicting every lie his lawyer had just told. The courtroom was silent except for Daniel's voice echoing through the speakers. You think you can humiliate me like this? You think you can just walk out on me? I'll drag you back if I have to. And then another, Catherine, please, come back. I didn't mean it. Everyone is talking. You made me look like a fool. Please, we can fix this. The judge's eyes narrowed. His gavel tapped once against the desk, the sound sharp as a gunshot.
Enough.
Daniel squirmed, tugging at his collar. His lawyer shuffled papers, his smirk long gone. I sat back, letting the venom of his own words sink into the courtroom like poison. He had built a life of lies, and now those lies were unraveling in front of strangers, colleagues and officials who would put it on record forever. When the judge finally delivered the ruling, it was everything I had hoped for. Daniel was ordered to pay me $3,000 a month in alimony money he would feel bleed out of his accounts month after month like a wound that wouldn't heal. More than that, he was forced to surrender half of the Boston house he had inherited from his father, a property his family had guarded with pride for decades. His arrogance had cost him not just money but legacy. And his mother? Lorraine, the woman who had smirked when her son slapped me, who had thrived on my humiliation. She didn't show up. Not to defend him, not to glare at me across the courtroom. Her absence was louder than any insult. Even she knew the tide had turned. When the gavel struck for the final time, sealing the judgment, I felt no sorrow. Only fire, the kind that doesn't destroy you but purifies you. Daniel had tried to make me small, tried to turn me into a shadow of myself. But standing there, watching his shoulders slump, his eyes dart to the floor, I felt taller than I ever had. He tried to speak to me afterward, his voice trembling, his hand reaching out like a drowning man clutching for a rope. Catherine, please. I didn't stop walking. I didn't look at him. I passed him like he was nothing more than a stranger on the street. A man whose name I would forget the moment the courtroom doors closed behind me. That night, back in Denver, I sat on my porch with Madison. The air was cool. The stars stretched across the Colorado sky like a crown of diamonds. She poured us both glasses of wine, her expression tired but satisfied. She raised her glass, her voice calm but firm. To freedom, she said. I lifted mine, a slow smile spreading across my face, not the soft smile of happiness, but the sharp smile of triumph. To revenge. The clink of our glasses rang out into the night like the sound of victory. I leaned back, letting the cool breeze wash over me, and for the first time in years I felt alive, not as Daniel's wife, not as someone's project, not as the victim of humiliation. I was Catherine. The woman who had taken back her power, who had waged her war and won. The scars on my cheeks still existed, invisible but etched in memory. Yet now they weren't marks of shame. They were reminders of a battle fought and conquered. Every time I touched my face, I remembered the slap that started it all and the empire of revenge I had built from that single moment. Daniel would live with the ruin I left behind. Every payment would remind him of the woman he thought he could break. Every whisper in his circles, every sideways glance from friends, every empty chair at family dinners would remind him that he had created his own destruction. And I would live with freedom, strength, and the satisfaction of knowing that he would never forget the day Catherine turned fire into fury. For me, the war was over. But for him, the reckoning had only just begun.